The following program, The Russ Belville Show, is intended for responsible adults only. We advocate to the repeal of marijuana prohibition for adults. We discuss the science, culture, and controversy about America's marijuana laws. We do not advocate any illegal activity and encourage all listeners to learn their state and federal marijuana laws. Opinions and claims made by guests and advertisers on The Russ Belville Show are their own, and The Russ Belville Show cannot be held legally responsible for their validity or reliability. Viewer discretion is advised.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
From the promise of legalization.
And I think that we need to rethink and decriminalize our marijuana laws.
To the agony of prohibition.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
The Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
Yeah, I hear you had a question for me.
Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes, and welcome to the show. It is Tuesday, September 10th, 2013, and we've got a very special edition of the Russ Belville program for you today, because today we are hearing historic hearings at the Senate Judiciary Committee. Pat Leahy, the senator from Vermont, is holding hearings on the effect of statewide marijuana legalization in Washington and Colorado on the United States and where we should go from here, especially with respect to the 2013 August memo from Deputy Attorney General Cole, basically saying they would not sue to overturn these laws. So these are very historic hearings. And joining us today in our panel to talk about this, we've got our good friend Danny Danko from High Times Magazine. How you doing, Danny?
I'm great. Can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine. And what a historic day as far as marijuana politics go. Did you ever think we'd be talking about legalization in the Senate?
No, I think it's amazing, and I'm really interested to hear what they say about this discrepancy between federal and state laws. And the ultimate result of it has to be, I think, an unscheduling or descheduling of marijuana from the federal schedule.
And that's something we talk about a little bit in the inside baseball world of marijuana reform. But tell our audience, because a lot of people will hear about marijuana being Schedule 1 and then ought to be rescheduled. But you're talking about descheduled. What's the difference?
Well, I mean, it's not a harmful drug at all. It's actually quite helpful. So I think, things like aspirin, I don't think they have a schedule even. And I think it's better not to even go to Schedule 2 because, ultimately we just want to removed from that type of regulation altogether.
While Schedule 2 would help researchers and pharmacists to be able to dispense marijuana, we have to remember that meth and cocaine are Schedule 2, and you still get busted for those.
Yeah, and I mean anything's better right now than Schedule 1, which just means no medicinal benefits at all. So if Schedule 2 would be an improvement, but just removing it from the list would be ideal.
Absolutely. Now, in the testimony we'll be hearing, this will be starting in about 25 minutes, and we're going to bring you the live webcast here on 420 Radio, and we'll be sitting back here for commentary as well because there'll be, breaks and pauses and such. Testifying first will be the Honorable James Cole. James Cole, of course, is our Deputy Attorney General from the Department of Justice and the man who authored this memo in August that basically gave us the green light to see what we could do as far as marijuana legalization, so long as we adhered to 8 priorities the federal government listed. That's the first panel, just the Deputy Attorney General being questioned by the senators. Then there's a second panel, and this is got 3 people on this panel. The Honorable Sheriff John Urquhart from King County, Washington, to see how legalization's gone in Seattle. Jack Finlaw, who's the Chief Legal Counsel for the Office of Governor John Hickenlooper in Colorado, so he can tell us what's going on in Denver. And then The Joker to my Batman, Kevin Sabet, the co-founder and director of Project SAM and the director of the Drug Policy Institute at the University of Florida, somehow weaseled his way onto this panel for testimony. Danny, do you think this is the hand of Patrick Kennedy, perhaps pulling in some favors?
Perhaps. I mean, he definitely has friends in politics, and so it would make sense that he was able to get Kevin on there. But Kevin makes a living telling lies, and having him representing any kind of intelligent, rational sort of debate is pretty much, showing that this hearing, isn't really going to take things quite seriously.
Yeah, we will see what happens. I've got a copy of Kevin's testimony. We'll talk about it here in just a second. I get to page 2, and I've already found 3 lies. So we'll talk a little bit about that here in a second. But I want to introduce some other folks that are hanging out in our panel. Our good friend Gray Wolf, who's our chat administrator, is hanging out there in Denver, Colorado. Gray, can you hear me okay? We'll see if we can get Gray online. Do you have a mic, Gray?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, fantastic. Now, Gray's in Denver, Colorado, so you can tell us just how badly Colorado's gone to hell since you've legalized.
Oh, gosh, it's just terrible. People are it's all peace and love, and it's Denver is one of the most quiet cities, Yeah. Yeah, it's a city, and it has its share of violence, but it seems like the potheads here don't get that way.
Yeah, notwithstanding that 420 event that was out there at the Civic Center, when somebody was involved in a shooting out there.
I'm pretty sure that was gang related.
Yeah, probably was. Of course, they and I was kind of surprised. At least nationally, I don't think the media blew that up too much. How did it get reported in Colorado? Did they kind of attribute it to like gang issues or something?
Well, they're never that kind to us whenever there's an incident in one of our events. They always play up on it, but no, I think the cup overshadowed it a lot.
Yeah. I think you're right. Also joining us in our chat room, we've got Kenny Davis, our good friend cousin Kenny, who speaks to us as a father from Portland, Oregon, with 2 young daughters. And of course, Kenny, a lot of the fear mongering that Kevin Sabet will be bringing up today will be, what about the children? We're going to legalize weed, and suddenly we'll have Joe Camel advertising to your little girls. What's your feelings on that issue?
Well, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, we got you.
Okay. My feelings on that is that if you're not talking to your children about this, then you're not educating them, and that leaves it up to everybody else. The fear mongers can get right in there, fill them full of whatever. So my thing is always just be honest, tell them the truth. If they ask a question, don't cover it up. Don't try to, make it all flowers and unicorns and stuff. Tell them about it. Tell them what it does, how it helps, and just be honest with them.
Right.
They're people, for goodness sakes.
Now, I know you're at work, Katie, so we don't want to get you in too much trouble, but do you think legalization makes that job as a parent easier or harder?
I think it makes it easier. No question. There's nothing, when it's legal, there's nothing to hide.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's go back to Danny Danko here for a second. And Danny, this testimony, of course, we're going to, in addition to Kevin Sabet, who, of course, I'm kind of warming up for. I can't wait for this. But we've also got the sheriff from King County in Washington, Seattle, Washington, and the legal counsel from Denver, Colorado. High Times has recently done cannabis cups. We kind of briefly mentioned in passing the 420 cup in Denver, and we just got done with the Seattle cannabis cup. How has the effect of legalization been for High Times, especially considering you guys had done medical cups there in the past?
Yeah, it's certainly gotten more people to our events, and the interest level from people who, just avoided it based on illegality is just through the roof, particularly people who saw the Sanjay Gupta special, whose children might be suffering from some of those symptoms that some of those kids had, and that whole questions about CBD. I mean, we've just seen more people searching for that on our website, more people at the cups interested in finding out about medical marijuana for their elderly parents, for their children, for themselves. And so the legalization thing, I mean, in Washington and Colorado, it has just boosted the argument to a situation where people aren't arguing if it will happen, but only when and how. And that's pretty much where we're at now. The ball is rolling on that, and we just have to make sure we don't sacrifice any of our values as a cannabis culture and a community.
Yeah, that inevitability is being felt here on the West Coast, especially here in the state of Oregon, where we're bracketed by California, who got damn close in 2010, Washington that passed it in 2012, to the point where our editorial board at the Oregonian, who's not pro-pot by any means, they've been kind of conservative and negative on most of those issues, but they have come out in 2 editorials now that have basically said, look, if the legislature doesn't legalize this stuff and do it in a responsible way, these stoners over here are going to pass something. So, I mean, we're seeing an inevitability here in the West Coast that seems unstoppable. How does this translate back east, Danny, as far as these legislatures that are just, I mean, barely passing medical with, enough restrictions to chain you to a radiator, so you don't get away with your evil weed? Is this having an effect back east? Do they feel the inevitability of it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I've been to Rhode Island and Maine and places like that where they are allowed to be caregivers and grow their own. And, the people I meet there are almost always at least less than one person or 2 people removed from someone that can provide them with good medical cannabis at a reasonable price. And I think that's huge. So, it's true that some of the other laws aren't very, are very restrictive, but, that put medical cannabis on the table, and now it's our job to get it for everyone that can get it, and get it for recreational use as well.
Excellent.
As far as the news from Washington and Oregon, I think that reverberates worldwide. All people read in overseas in Europe is how American drug policy affects them over there, and how our influence is why countries like France and Germany crack down on Amsterdam. But if we're going to legalize here in the States, then they don't have to crack down on Amsterdam. So it's a global issue, and when people hear that U.S. states are doing this, they realize that they can do it back home as well.
That's right, and you're listening to our 420 Radio live coverage of the Senate Judiciary hearings on state marijuana legalization, scheduled to testify here starting in just 15 minutes or so. We've got the Deputy Attorney General James Cole, the Sheriff of Seattle, John Urquhart, Sheriff King County, excuse me. We've got Jack Feinlaw from the Office of the Governor, the Chief Legal Counsel, and, of course, Kevin Sabet from Project SAM, who we're discussing here just a little bit with Danny Danko, Kenny Davis, and we've got Grey Wolf in the chat room. And just joining us now, I want to say hi to our Midwest correspondent, Lively Libra from the Libra Lounge. How are you doing, Libra?
Doing great, Russ. Thanks for having me. This is exciting.
Well, thank you very much for being a part of this, because I think, a lot of times in these cable news shows, we get, the expert panel of talking heads. As far as I'm concerned, this Senate is the American Senate. It's for us Americans, and we're all experts on this issue. And maybe you've got a perspective that all of us in the chat room can't even imagine. You're in the state of Iowa. We were just asking Danny how this inevitability of marijuana legalization, at least on the West Coast, is kind of heading east to the East Coast. How about in the Midwest? How about in Iowa? Do people feel marijuana in Washington and Colorado is a good thing, or do they fear it?
Well, the people I talk to think it's a good thing, but the people in power don't. For example, the famous Mr. Hemorrhoid, Clell Baldler,
yes,
was in charge of our medical bill this past year, and he single-handedly killed it in committee. The Iowa Pharmacy Board has passed that it should be removed from Schedule 1. And in committee, he said, I don't understand what the Pharmacy Board's doing. And he says, I'll listen to law enforcement because he's a former cop. But he says this is, this medical's bull. Well, he's not representing the people, nor is he listening to us, because it's like around 60-some% consistently want medical. We're hovering around 50 for legalization, although I think those numbers went down recently. And what they always say Kalel says, well, I went to California and got my prescription for hemorrhoids, and it's a sham. So nobody should have it, including my friend Maria Smalla, who was paralyzed from the neck down from MS. She lives in Fairfield, and Kalel, she requested to be on speaker during that committee, and they never hooked her in. She currently has a complaint with the ACLU because she has been denied her right to speak as a citizen. So, no, they do not listen to us, nor do they intend to represent us.
Yeah, it is a shame, and this is, the situation is that we just pretty much, as the people, have to force it down some of these politicians' throat, or, as my friend Keith Stropp likes to say, some of them we're just going to have to outlive. Some of them are just going to have to be outlived. I want to encourage our folks in the chat room there, if you're not speaking, to mute yourself because the typing comes through kind of harshly there. So thank you very much. I got some really good news for everyone out there listening in the chat room and in our live audience. I invited a lot of people here to be a part of this panel, including members and representatives from the major drug law reform organizations. But understandably, their caseload's kind of busy for today. So they got AP, they got, CNN calling them. I'm not exactly high up on that list yet. But anyway, we got a great panel here talking about this. And I wanted to give you some news from one of the panelists who couldn't be with us because, as he said, he has a day job. Sunil Agarwal, who is MD, PhD, just brilliant man, who also went to school with Kevin Sabet in Berkeley. So he actually knows Kevin Sabet and did this fantastic piece on alternate.org that debunks Kevin Sabet's talking points, the top 5 lies or something like that. And then it also has a link to a biographical backgrounder on Kevin Sabet's history, dating all the way back to when he, believe this, folks, he went to Berkeley, California, went to school at Berkeley, and formed Students for a Drug-Free Berkeley. That's like forming, drummers for a rock-free music or something. I don't know how you even conceive of that, but he did. Well, Sunil sent me an email I just received a few hours ago. Steph Shearer from Americans for Safe Access told me earlier this morning that my alternate piece debunking Sabet was sent to the Judiciary Committee, and they will be getting hard copies of it to the senators. So huge news there, folks. Let's hear it. Let me go to Danny Danko on that. I don't know. Have you met Sunil Agarwal before at one of the events by any chance, Danny?
I have. He's a very intelligent advocate.
Yeah, they'll have that alternate piece there for the senators to read that goes through some of his talking points. And Danny, let me bring up a couple of these points that Kevin is going to make today and get your opinion on them. He talks about, he has headings. He's got them laid out in bold-faced headings. And the first heading is the importance of the CSA. And he doesn't mean Confederate States of America. He means the Controlled Substances Act. And one of his points, and I'll just read directly from this, this is his testimony. This is the first lie he's going to tell senators today. By keeping marijuana illegal, its use is lower than the use of our legal drugs. About 52% of Americans regularly drink, 27% use tobacco products, and yet only 8% currently use marijuana. So his theory here is because pot's illegal, that's why so few people use it compared to alcohol or tobacco. How would you respond to that, Danny?
I think more people should be using it. So I'm on the whole other side of that coin. I don't think everybody should be using it, of course, but it's not for everyone. But I think that there's plenty of people who could be helped by it who aren't getting it or don't have access to it. Yeah, I mean, I've debated Kevin on a couple of different shows. I'm sure you have as well. I've actually seen you do it. So it's, when you don't let the truth get in the way of an argument, you get people like that who are paid to just travel around and spout lies. And it's amazing to me that people like that exist or that they can even sleep at night. But he apparently can and, has a career built upon it. So, I asked him about, the raids and people's doors being knocked down by SWAT teams and dogs being shot and people being murdered by SWAT teams for defending their homes simply due to having some flowers growing in the home. Sometimes they get the wrong address and all of that. He pretended like none of that ever happens. And if you're talking to someone like that, there's not really a lot of reasoning. It's he's a talking head and he's paid to do it. So the last remaining bastions of our opposition.
Yeah, it's the scream of the dinosaurs as they slink into the mud pits. Let me go to Lively Lieber here for a second, just on this topic of 52% of Americans drink, 27% use tobacco, only 8% use marijuana. Do you really think it's the legality of beer and tobacco that make them so popular and the illegality of cannabis that keeps it unpopular?
Oh, I don't. Who knows what causes what, I think Danny's right. I think more people should use cannabis and fewer people should use alcohol. If you just look at the behaviors and the social costs, it's simple. And so I have a lot of friends who say, yeah, if it were legal, I'd do it, and I think that's a good thing because what they do now is go to bars and get in their cars in the parking lot right next to it, as you've pointed out before, and, stuff happens. And so I think that in general, more usage would be a good thing, and especially if we look at, I don't really think that we should regulate it like alcohol because there's no, medical benefits from alcohol except for a topical to numb, and so we have to start studying this and looking at it because, I have glaucoma. It helps for that. It also, Alzheimer's is in my family. It could be preventing me from getting Alzheimer's. There's just all of this stuff we have to study, and the same is not true for alcohol or tobacco. So it is availability. And big deal if usage goes up.
I think you're hitting on it, and that's the point I wanted to get to, is that statement that, over half the people use alcohol, over a quarter of the people use tobacco, under an eighth of the people use marijuana, is based on the assumption that marijuana use going up would be a bad thing. Number one, alcohol use, if it goes up, we'll have more drunk drivers and domestic abuse. If tobacco use goes up, we'll have more lung cancer and more lung disease and early death. If cannabis use goes up, we'll have better albums, better music. I mean, what's the big fear if cannabis use goes up? We don't have more death. We don't have more destruction. And that's where Sabet loses the argument, is he fails to admit that cannabis use goes on now and there's not a whole lot of harm coming from it. And again, I go back to Grey Wolf back there in Denver, Colorado, where, God, I drive down in Denver when I'm around there. I see green crosses almost every block on Colfax. I see plenty of people smoking weed. And to my knowledge, the use by youth in Colorado has gone down somewhat. And do you really see more people taking up pot now that it's legal? Robert, do you see that? Like people that wanted to give it a try are now giving it a try?
I got to reiterate a point that Libra just made, that a lot of people, and I mean a lot of people, my lifestyle took me on the road most of my life. And most of the people I talk to that drink, a lot of the people I talk to that drink tell me that they would probably not drink or not drink as much if they could smoke pot legal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's an important point to make, too, is that if there is a rise in cannabis use, that doesn't happen in a vacuum. Oftentimes it's a substitution for alcohol or prescription drug use.
Yes. And I think that's going on here.
I think so too. Grey Wolf, I want to let folks know, if they're tuning in just now, we are just about to go live with the Senate Judiciary hearings on marijuana. I just brought the window up a second ago. Looks like they've got the title panel ready. Let me see if I can resize this any and make it fit within our screen. There we go. But this will be starting here at 2:30, and that's about 5 minutes away Eastern time. I want to welcome another guest to our chat. We've got Trickster Phillips, who's calling us from the state of Missouri. Trickster, how you doing out there? Oh, he may have himself muted just in the chat room right at the moment. So we'll go back to Danny Danko, who's in New York right at this moment. And as we get ready for these hearings, let me give you another bit of Sabetism that we found. He has a heading that says international law and warns that by giving Washington and Colorado the go-ahead to start a massive for-profit commercial industry for marijuana, the United States will violate its treaty obligations under the UN Single Convention Treaty of 61, the Convention on Psychotropic Substances of 71, and the Convention Against Illicit Traffic of 1988. Wow, Danny, this just in, the United States government might violate a treaty.
Yeah, why get started not violating them now? Is what I say. And also, the UN, those treaties were made by us to pressure the rest of the world into stricter prohibition. So were it not, I said this earlier, but were it not for the United States, there would not be the same crackdowns that you see in Europe, the same crackdowns that you see in South America. I mean, the whole drug war in Mexico and Colombia is fueled by American demand. And so for us to say, oh, we don't want to legalize because it would violate some agreement that we made at the UN, I mean, I can't see anybody really seriously arguing that point as being the reason to continue this failed policy of prohibition. I mean,
yeah, I just received a phone call from Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse, and they're upset as hell about this. Let me tell you. All right, so let me get to another quick point before they get started. We got about 3 minutes here before they get started, if they start on time. And Sabet, in his testimony, this is his written testimony, and I've got a link to this up at 420radio.org if you want to follow along. In his written testimony, he actually kind of gets to your point, Danny. He gets to your point about us forcing the whole world, but kind of in a reverse way, in that Washington and Colorado now are starting to lead the rest of the world. Sabet complains about this. Last week, I was invited to speak about legalization to a group of Mexican lawmakers in Mexico City. Universally, they asked, will people that we, the Mexican government, consider criminals, drug traffickers and producers, now be able to flee safely to Colorado and Washington under your new laws? And how can your government keep telling Mexico to stop producing and trafficking marijuana when your government is now openly approving and facilitating an increase in marijuana demand? And Sabet said he had no good answers for him. And I would say, yeah, you have no good answers because that's the way we should be leading. We should be leading the rest of the country out of this prohibition, just like we led the rest of the world into it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny that all his arguments are that weird circular logic that goes back to the old same thing that we heard in the 80s, which was it's illegal because it's wrong, and it's wrong because it's illegal. And they just keep, running that loop of things, and then occasionally you talk about the children, or you talk about, psychosis or something, bring up some old drug board, rhetoric, but it all points back to the fact that they really have no case.
There is no case to be made here. And let me move to Lively Libre here for a second, because I wanted to ask you about the children. What about the children? So as he goes on further in this consequences of legalization, he one of his consequences is the distribution of marijuana to minors. He brings up the candies, like the Pot Tarts and the Keef Cat bars and those kind of things. But the one point he really wanted to get to was in 2007, tests positive for marijuana among students made up 33% of the total drug tests. In 2012, that number increased to 57% of all drug tests. Lieber, I'm wondering if you're picking out of that stat the good news that I'm picking out of it.
More kids are not using pharmaceuticals and spice and K2.
Bingo! There we go.
And back to the whole Mexico thing. I'd be happy to stop supporting the brickweed market that comes directly from Mexico. That's what I thought pot was for like 30 years.
Oh my!
It was brick and it was compressed, and I'd be happy to stop supporting the cartel. And I know the children that have it easily accessible now would enjoy stopping. I don't know. The whole thing is kids are using it now. And in Colorado, the kid use is going down while the rest of the country is going up. And we just kind of teased with the latest Libra Lounge, we're going to put some young adults on the mic. And the first young adult we're talking to is very afraid because all of his close friends are pillheads now.
Oh,
they
no.
are into pharmaceuticals so bad that their personality has changed, they're losing jobs, all because they're in the system somehow and they can't drop a dirty PUA for cannabis.
Oh my God, that's just terrible. So yeah, his threat here is that we had a third of the kids testing positive for marijuana out of all drug tests, and now it's over half of the kids testing positive. And like we said, so the distribution of marijuana as compared to heroin, cocaine, meth, spice, K2, anything else is gone down as more kids are using. And that's where I talk about that, the fact that these facts don't happen in a vacuum. The use of one can affect the use of the other. And
Right.
But like Danny Danko said, the argument just keeps coming back.
Drugs are bad. You shouldn't do drugs. If you do them, you're bad because drugs are bad. Okay.
So that is basically what's going on there. We've got the Senate hearing supposed to be starting right now. In fact, they're a minute late on starting the hearing. Surprise. We stoners were on time and the Senate was late. What do you think of that, Danny?
Do we get to cat call during this live?
Yes, absolutely. We are doing MST3K style here. So everybody who's out there in the chat room, if something strikes you and you want to mention it, go ahead and we will do that. I think what I'll do right now is I'll give our chat room just a little bit of break and let me put some music on briefly here for us. And when we come back, we hope that they will be ready for us. So stick around. You're listening to the 420 Radio live coverage of the Senate Judiciary hearings on marijuana legalization. Welcome back. Continuing our live coverage of the Senate Judiciary hearings entitled Conflicts Between State and Federal Marijuana Laws. Coverage is supposed to start at 2:30. We're going to see if we refresh this, get anything new, but it looks like it's still on the wait. So in the meantime, we're hanging out here with Danny Danko from Brooklyn, New York, and High Times Magazine. Welcome back, Danny.
Yeah, thanks for having me. That was a fun time in Seattle. I'm still sort of recovering. Flew in late last night and here at the office in Columbus Circle. I'm really interested to hear if this is a bunch of lip service that they're going to pay, or if it's going to be a serious hearing where people are going to be asked the hard questions to really justify a failed policy with any kind of justification.
Yeah, if any logic or reason happens to show up. And we mentioned that the Senator Patrick Leahy is in charge of this committee hearing. He is the chairman of that committee, but there are some others who are on the committee that I think we ought to know about, particularly the ranking member, Chuck Grassley, who's got the most ironic name because he is anti-Grassley, if anything. And I want to talk to...
No, not Grassley!
Let's talk to Lively Libra. He is your Senator, Libra. Tell us about him.
Oh, my God. If you write Grassley about anything pot-related, he regurgitates a 1970s pot is bad, it's illegal letter back to you. This is bad.
70s
this is bad,
letter,
bad, bad.
So Chuck Grassley's not going to be much help here on this forum.
Carl Olson is working on scheduling, and he's got some stuff going. He's an Iowa activist, You got to check out Carl. Mm-hmm. He's working on through the Supreme Court and doing some legal stuff, and he Latham is an Iowa congressman who is listening, but apparently he has to talk to Grassley, and I don't know how this is all going to go down.
All right. Now, also on the committee, we've got Dianne Feinstein of California, Democrat out of California, but maybe in name only, because her opposition to Prop 19 back in 2010 wasn't just in voice. She actually chaired the committee, Danny, that opposed Prop 19. Do we have any indication of how Dianne Feinstein might be on this issue recently?
I really don't. I mean, I would expect her being, a California Democrat, right? That's what I thought. I would expect her full-fledged support for what's pretty much, California Democrat policy. But, something happens when these state officials become feds, where they suddenly lose all ability to comprehend the things that they understood to be the truth. I mean, look at the last drug czar, Gil Kurlikowski. I mean, that guy was the Seattle police chief, right? And I mean, he had a somewhat of a hands-off policy. He had stated, numerous times that marijuana was not his problem. And then there he gets that federal position and everything changes.
Yeah, it is. We saw that happen with Barack Obama going from we ought to rethink and decriminalize our marijuana laws to legalization's not in my vocabulary. I want to let folks know, if you're tuning in for the live coverage of the Senate hearings, we are too. We are just waiting for that hearing to be underway. I'm showing the screen right now from the hearing, and of course, nobody's there yet. Those of us in the cannabis community who are on time, our senators, they're on stoner people time, I guess. So let's go back to our panel. We've been discussing these upcoming hearings, and we've got a variety of voices from all across the United States. And now joining us on the video camera, we've got Trickster Phillips, who's out there in Missouri. And Trix, I'm just wondering what you think about these upcoming hearings, and especially Kevin Sabet's participation in them.
Well, to be honest with you, I don't know a whole lot about, or really anything about any of the politicians. I gather it's kind of a mix of those in favor and those opposed. I imagine Kevin Sabet's just going to kind of chime in and do his standard song and dance about, like you said, drugs are bad, don't do drugs, okay?
Yeah.
But, I don't know, as far as that guy is concerned, I honestly think that he enjoys the game. To him, I guess he was probably a debate kid, one of the debate club kids. And as far as his arguments go, I've noticed that he uses every fallacy in the book, to his advantage, just to simply frame things in a way that make marijuana look bad or marijuana users look bad. Like one in particular, when you guys were debating down in Texas, how he cleverly kind of and slyly turned it around that, basically said that white kids are smart enough to go into the basement and smoke pot. And it's not really the problem with law enforcement as to why it's so disproportionately harms the black community. It's because the black kids are basically not smart enough to get off the stoop and go hide and smoke pot. So
yeah, and Danny, let's go back on that issue, because I mean, you you're living in the city. You live in the city where, not every kid's got a basement. They got a stoop, and that's probably what you're seeing day after day.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these kids are in the street or in the park because they can't smoke at home, and I think it's crazy that that would be the way he reads those figures. I live here in New York where they have stop and frisk. Now, I have never been stop and frisked in New York, and I have black friends who it happens to on a pretty routine basis, and that's literally what they have to tell their children about. And we view our police force here like the biggest gang on the street as far as we're concerned as a pot smoking population, because we're their easiest arrest and we're the pot arrest capital of the world. So we view them with suspicion, whether we're white or black. But black and Hispanic people in this city are 80 to 90% of the people arrested, and 80 to 90% of the people who are stop and frisked, and those things are related, and those things are racist, and that's pretty basic. I mean, I can't imagine we're even debating that in 2013, but here we are. We've got people like Kevin who will oppose us without the basis of facts.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because Sabet has been attacked on that angle before, the racial disparity in marijuana arrests, prosecution, and incarceration. And one of his responses, and I'm skimming through his testimony, I don't see him getting to it in this testimony, but I've read his work, and I should have my PhD in sabotology at this point, that he has actually responded to that by saying, no, legalization would actually be worse for people in minority neighborhoods, because just like there's more liquor stores in the minority neighborhoods, there'll be more pot shops, and there'll be all sorts of, marketing to black and Latino kids. And I'm just wondering, anybody on the panel wants to chime in on that. What do you think of that? If you're a parent out there, I know Libra and Kenny are parents. Let's go to Libra and get your take on that idea.
All right. Well, I was just bugging Sharon. Can we invite Sharon in here?
Oh, absolutely. I'll send the invite right now.
Yeah, because she's a mom, and we were working all morning on her Boston Freedom Rally speeches. She's doing a couple, and we were all, the first one is all about being a mom and what this all means, and how, women and seniors are going to be the trim tab that's going to help change this movement, I think. Anyway, so ask the question again. Here, paraphrase it for me.
Well, it's basically Kevin Sabet saying that while currently under prohibition we have far more disproportionate racial enforcement of our laws, with black and Latino people being more likely to get busted, he says that that's not going to get fixed by legalization, because then what'll happen is big marijuana will set up pot shops on every corner and start, marketing to all the black and Latino kids, and it'll just be just as bad.
Well, so big deal. They're not in jail.
Ding. That's what I wanted to get to, is like, gee, you think a pot shop on every corner would be worse than having a dealer on every corner?
It's so true.
Makes
this
no
opposite
sense.
day is so maddening. And Iowa has the distinction of being the #1 state in racial disparity, because we have so few minorities. You stick out like a sore thumb here. So yes, you are targeted at alarming rates.
Well, not to make too clumsy a segue on that, but let me go to my cousin Kenny here, who, as a black man living in Idaho, might know what you're talking about from when we lived back in Idaho. Kenny, what do you think of this nonsense from Kevin Sabet? Oh, Kenny might have had to go back to work. I don't know if he's got ability to be able to talk to us. So let me just switch back to Danny Danko here. And again, folks, we're waiting for the hearing to start. It was supposed to start about 15 minutes ago. We are still looking at this screen that says its coverage begins at 2:30 p.m. And Danny, you're on the East Coast. It's past 2:30 p.m., I believe.
It is. It's 2:45 here. I hope we're not paying them for this 15 minutes in our tax money.
Yeah, no kidding.
But to your point that you made earlier about the pot shops in minority neighborhoods, the fact is that we've seen pot shops actually improve neighborhoods, particularly Oaksterdam and that whole area, and Berkeley Patients Group. Most of the great pot shops dispensaries or collectives or whatever you want to call them that I know of, the best ones, the ones that set an example, actually do community relations. They look out for that block that they're on. They make sure that there's flowers planted in the planters outside, and that the kids, daycare across the street gets, some cookies and fruit and things like that. I know that that's the policy of many of the pot shops because they want the community to accept them and allow them to exist, and I think it's a great policy. You have to, be good neighbors, and you have to make sure people aren't, congregating outside and smoking and doing all that, and I think the best shops are ones that do that, and those are ones that actually improve their surroundings.
Yeah, I think it's going to take a while for people to understand a basic fact. If you've got a drug dealer on your corner and you want to get rid of him, you got to arrest him, and another drug dealer shows up the next day. You got a pot shop on your corner that's not doing the job well, you pull its license, and it's gone. Or someone takes over that can fulfill the license requirements, or the owner fulfills the license requirements on his own. Regulation is what makes that happen, not prohibition. All right, let me get to a whopper. Oh my God, it's hard for me to even read this without the gods of truth and reason striking me dead where I stand. This is from Kevin Sabet's testimony. We've got a copy of his written testimony, and it's available at the Senate's website. I've also put a link to it at 420radio.org. In his testimony, and part of what he's trying to make of this testimony is that the Cole memo laid out 8 priorities for the federal government. From the federal government, so that if the state legalization follows these priorities, they're not likely to see interference. And so he's going point by point to basically say, look, these points that you have are just going to get worse if you legalize. And his first one was the distribution of marijuana to minors. We brought up the Colorado numbers and the drug test numbers. And here's how he follows up on that. He says, a member of the Colorado task force charged to regulate marijuana, who also works for a drug testing company. Let me translate. Christian Thurstone, his buddy from Project Sam, says, or commented to the press, quote, a typical kid is between 50 and 100 nanograms. Now we're seeing these up in the over 500, 700, 800 climbing, end quote. Yes. Somebody was chiming in there? Well, anyway, let me get to this point. Basically what he's trying to say, and I've read Christian Thurstone on this before, is that since Colorado has had its explosion of dispensaries, kids that were testing at 100 or 50 or 100 nanograms of THC are now testing for over 800 nanograms of THC. Now, I called him on this because I said, wait a minute, you're telling me kids in Colorado were previously testing at 10 to 20 times the drugged driving limit of 5 nanograms, and now they're testing 100 to 200 times that limit? Really? Are you sure you're not talking about metabolites in pee? And they came back and said, no, we tested for active THC. Danny, how big of a lie is this? Oh, did I lose Danny out there?
Sorry, I was muted there just now.
Oh, thank you for muting. But yeah, I mean, he's saying these kids are testing for 800 nanograms of THC.
Yeah, and that's Kevin's testimony?
That's in Kevin's written testimony, quoting his friend Dr. Christian Thurstone from the Project Sam.
Yeah, I just can't take anything they say seriously, and their whole reason for existing is that they're backed by pharmaceutical companies. I mean, they are the mouthpiece of our opponents, and I just taking them seriously in a debate is ridiculous. They don't listen to the truth.
Yeah, and for folks that may not be hip on the science of what we're talking about here, when you go to get a job and you have to take one of those P tests for work, they are testing for inert metabolites of pot, which basically is like the residue, the leftovers, right? After you've been high, your body produces these residues, and they can be numbers that range in the hundreds, 200s, 500s, and so on. But when we're talking about active THC, like you're high now and the THC is in your blood now, this is where Colorado and Washington have set a 5 nanogram limit. And when Como News did their report on the patients that were trying to drive, and they gave them like 0.3 grams every 20 minutes to smoke, after like 7 or 8 smoking sessions, one of the patients was up to 33. And she was high as hell. She's up to like 33 or 34. So for Thurstone and Sabet to tell Congress that these people are between 500 to 800 nanograms and climbing, when clearly they're trying to confuse the issue between metabolites and active THC, well, that's just offensive and close to perjurous. But we'll save that for the courts to decide. Let me go to another guest who's just joined us on our panel, a mother, member of the Georgia Moms for Marijuana and the Normal Women's Alliance, and a good friend of the show. Sharon Ravert is on with us. How you doing, Sharon?
How are you, Russ?
I'm doing fantastic, and I'm so glad to have you here. We've got a voice here from Georgia, and one of the interesting things I find on this panel is there are no senators on the Judiciary Committee from Colorado or Washington. They're all senators from other parts of the country, including 2 senators from Utah and 2 senators from Minnesota. So the entire country has different values and different perspectives on this stuff. And I'm wondering, Sharon, as a Republican woman in the South, a mother of 2, we talked earlier and we asked folks about, do you feel like there's an inevitability to this? Because out here in the West Coast, it feels inevitable. Do these changes in Washington and Colorado, are they having an effect on the politicians there in Georgia in the South?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Washington and Colorado's votes in November have pushed the South light years ahead of where we have been, and hopefully it will continue on. I'm finding a lot of support in the South. We seem to be rebels, so we focus on different issues and talking points than y'all may out there. We focus on states' rights. On more of the libertarian look at it when it comes to some of the people here. But the majority of the support I'm finding is to go for full legalization and to not mess around with medical. A lot of people feel if we take that step, it'll be another 10 years before we even get to discuss legalization, and we're tired of waiting.
That's fantastic news. And, that's what I'm hoping to see as well, is that people recognize that we can piecemeal this and go from decrim to medical to loosening medical to getting to legal. But I think there's a lot of ways we can show, especially between Washington and Colorado, that, once you've gone from medical to legal, there's not really a ton of difference. And let me go to Gray Wolf out there in Colorado. You guys had medical since 2000. Your dispensaries kind of blew up in 2009 or so. You got legalization in 2012. Does it really seem like there's a whole lot of difference in, the day-to-day perceptions of cannabis in Colorado now?
Yes and no. What I see, I'm in basically a liberal zone of Colorado. Most of the state's red.
Okay.
I'm in a zone where people are just mainly for whether they smoke or not. I keep hearing, I campaigned for 64. And I didn't talk to people, I didn't talk to hippies. I talked to people in business suits. I talked to mothers with strollers. I talked to those people, the people that haven't been convinced yet, or I thought. And you know what I found? I found mostly a lot of those suits. Why don't we just legalize it?
Yeah, that's good to hear. And let me welcome another panelist who's joined us from the state of Arizona, our friend Robert, also known as Bago Schwago. How you doing out there? I think we may have you on mute. You may have to turn your microphone on there, Robert.
There, is that better? Can you hear me?
Yes. I'm starting to see some tweets coming through here on the hearing, but I'm not seeing it here on my it may have started. So if you guys don't mind, I'm going to put you on hold. We'll put some music on, and hopefully we come back and the hearing will be running. So stay tuned. You're watching our live coverage of the Senate Judiciary hearings right here on 420radio.org.
The rationale for the use of scarce law enforcement and prosecutive resources is extremely low. So there does not seem to be an underlying need for conflict between federal prosecution policies and state marijuana policies, and yet I believe that in the past, largely due to
Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island is speaking at the Judiciary Hearing Committee.
Often inconsistent policies from the Department of Justice, there has been created an artificial conflict. And I think the new memo helps clarify that, and I look forward to this hearing help to clarify it further. And I thank the Deputy Attorney General, who I respect very much, for coming here to discuss this issue with us, and I thank the Chairman for holding this important hearing.
Senator Grassley?
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to give my opening statement.
Certainly, go ahead.
Thank you. Of course, I thank you very much for holding today's hearing about the conflict between federal and state laws. Since Congress passed the Controlled Substance Act, the cultivation, trafficking, sale, and use of marijuana have been illegal under federal law. Marijuana's continued presence on this statute's list of illegal substances isn't based on whim. It's based on what science tells us about this dangerous and addictive drug. There's a process that exists to move drugs on and off that list, but the scientific standard to do that hasn't yet been met for marijuana. Marijuana isn't only illegal under laws passed by Congress, it's illegal under international law as well. The United States and 180 nations have signed the Single Convention on Narcotics Drugs. This treaty requires the United States to limit the distribution and use of certain drugs, including marijuana, for exclusively scientific and medical use. It's something this country gave its word to do, and it's a commitment that our country and many others have benefited from through improved public health. Yet, in 2012, Colorado and Washington decided to be the first jurisdiction in the world to legalize the cultivation, trafficking, sale, and recreational use of marijuana. These laws flatly contradict our federal law. Moreover, these laws have nothing to do with the controversy about whether marijuana has an appropriate medical use. Some experts fear they will create a big marijuana industry, including a Starbucks of marijuana, that will damage public health. And it seems unlikely that we'll be able to confine that industry's effect to adults and those within the states of Colorado and Washington. And the response of the Department of Justice isn't to sue to strike down the laws or to prosecute illegal drug traffickers, but just let these states do it. These policies do not seem to be compatible with the responsibility of our Justice Department has to faithfully discharge their duties, and they may be a violation of our treaty obligations. Prosecutorial discretion is one thing, but giving the green light to an entire industry predicated on breaking federal law is quite another. These policies are another example of this administration ignoring laws that it views as inconvenient or that it doesn't like. Whether it's immigration laws or Obama deadlines, the list is long and it hardly needs repeating. But what's really striking in this case is that the Department of Justice is so quick to challenge state laws when it doesn't like or want to enforce them. States that change their voting laws to require an ID, we'll see you in court. States that try to secure their borders when the federal government won't, expect a lawsuit. But if some folks want to start an industry dedicated to breaking federal law, well, then the department's position is to wait and see how it works out. But we already have a pretty good idea how it works out, and the answer is badly. Take Colorado, example. Since it's legalized and attempted to regulate medical marijuana, what have we seen? From 2006 to